will be on our recommendations for the future. My name's Ryan.
My name's Kristen.
I'm Lit.
I'm Mackenzie.
And I'm Zach.
Alright, and I'm going to start off with the agenda. So today we're just going to give you a brief industry overview, then we're going to go into the competition, and we're going to place that competition side by side to give a better view of the flaws and also positive aspects of what Cumulus is doing currently. And then we're going to lead right into our recommendations and then open up for some questions. So currently the radio industry is a $20.4 billion industry within a $1.4 trillion U.S. media market. This media market consists of any type of way to get news and entertainment. So that can be magazines, television, any type of medium of that characteristic. And then moving into radio industry specifically, the radio industry is interesting because it reaches 93% of Americans weekly. So it has this really broad reach that reaches almost every demographic. And then kind of in regards to its growth, it's growing at a 4% growth rate, which is actually less than the market GDP. So we split the radio industry into 3 different parts. So there's AM/FM broadcasting, satellite, and online. And through this, we're going to analyze the competitors, mostly in the AM/FM region, because that's going to be the direct competition for Cumulus. So currently, Cumulus's direct competition is iHeartMedia and Entercom. And they also fall into that online category because they have digital platforms that let you reach their content through online. Now I'll pass it off to Zach.
Okay, so our first slide is our company analysis on iHeartMedia. iHeartMedia was formerly known as Clear Channel. The reason for the switch in name is for a rebranding, more catered towards a younger demographic. iHeartMedia itself delivers content on multiple different platforms through a centralized app, which is called iHeartRadio. iHeartMedia itself has utilized partnerships and acquisitions that have kind of like set them apart from Cumulus Media. Specifically, the partnership with Omicron for advertising insight, which directly correlates with the live events, which boost brand awareness. And since this acquisition, brand awareness is now at 85%, and it's been downloaded, or iHeartRadio has been downloaded over 1.7 billion times. Also, noted to that, the acquisition of Thumbplay allows iHeartMedia to leverage assets across all digital platforms. This is just like, the iHeartRadio app is more accessible to the consumer and lets them listen whenever, wherever they want with their favorite songs. And as of 2018, it has been incorporated in 750 of their radio stations. I'm going to pass it off to Mackenzie for the next company analysis.
Thank you, Zach. Entercom is the most successful of the 3 companies we're looking at. In the past year, they've merged with CBS Radio, taking them from a company with a $430 million market capacity to a company with a $2 billion market capacity. In the past year, they've increased to 4,500 live events, as well as they now own 235 radio stations. Entercom kind of exceeds Cumulus Media in their internet capabilities. The website is more accessible. Like iHeart, they also do have a virtualized app, but Entercom stays successful because of their focus market. As mentioned before, Entercom does have radio stations in 23 of the 25 leading U.S. media markets, and these are in large urban cities. In contrast, Cumulus Media and iHeartRadio went on a buying spree, purchasing radio stations in a broad range of markets, and these markets range from small size, mid-size, to large size, kind of scaling away from their area of expertise. I'll hand it off to Ryan.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Of course.
So this is a pretty basic chart that just puts these platforms these companies offer just in comparison. Obviously, Cumulus is missing out on the kind of the digital online aspects in platforms. iHeartMedia is hitting all tiers, and Entercom is missing one of the 4. Basically, we then went in to relate that kind of to profit margin. Profit margin is an overall measure of success within a company. Clearly, obviously, with companies that are in bankruptcy, those measurements aren't going to be too appealing. But in this case, we think also it relates to the fact of how they're utilizing these services they currently have. So next, we're going to look at some key financial measures and compare those. The particular ones we're looking at in this case are the debt ratio, net profit margin, and ROA. Debt ratio is just how companies are leveraging their debt within their firm. And as you can see with Cumulus Media and iHeart, since we went on this buying spree, and so has iHeart, we've been taking in companies with high amounts of debt and building that over time. Whereas Entercom has maintained this well-balanced amount of financial leverage. Net profit margin, we already touched on that. But the most interesting thing we're going to look at on this slide is return on assets. Basically, with return on assets, we want to look at first the total number of direct radio stations within the hands of these companies. So, if you look at Cumulus, we've got somewhere around 450 radio broadcasting stations. iHeartMedia has about 850. Entercom has about 250. But why is the company with the fewest amount of broadcasting stations maintaining the strongest ROA? We believe that's because they have a well-focused market, like we said, and they are giving strong content to that focused market. So we said before that they have 250 stations, but they're in 23 of the 25 leading radio markets in the U.S. So they're focusing on their expertise when they're engaging in business. They're focused on large-size media markets. And as we know, with us, we took in Citadel, and all of a sudden we went from a mid-sized media market-focused company, and then all of a sudden we had an inventory of radio stations that were focused in large markets, kind of straying away from what we've been experts in the past.
So, hey, Brian, so that chart, was that 1 year? Was that last year's? Or is that a combined 5 years?
Yeah, so this is the past year of 2016.
Okay.
Or sorry, 2017.
1 year, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to segue directly into our first recommendation, which is to consolidate. So basically with Chapter 11 bankruptcy, obviously everything's in a standstill right now. So once the SEC okays our filings, we then urge kind of an immediate shift to this consolidation that we're talking about. So company-wide consolidation is a pretty broad term, and I know you can just say back out of unprofitable deals, but currently given to us, we don't have any insights to the internal financials of the company. So how much our assets are bringing in terms of returns. So individual assets, individual stations. But it would be important going forward to establish a benchmark for these different stations so that we can assess their value and the amount they're bringing in, and so that we can label them unprofitable or not. So that would be different if you're looking at large-size markets rather than small-size markets, and that's going to depend within the company on how we set that benchmark. So set a benchmark and decide which ones are unprofitable or not, and then we're going to look into closing down physical aspects of the company. Brick and mortar studios, obviously with the main studio role, can be cut, and in our next recommendation we'll talk about a shift to digital applications, which would kind of help consolidate those physical areas of business so that you can transmit from more central locations. But those brick and mortar studios also, we want to talk about selling and general administrative. We've seen a slight shift in, it's only about 1.5% right now in our total amount of selling and general administrative expenses, and kind of cutting down on those. Some executives have been let go in the past year, yielding about $30 million. And so Mary Berner is kind of bringing in this era of consolidation. She was talking about one deal with a radio station, and this is just a quote, so I'm going to read it off to you guys. She said, "We are taking this action because the economic terms of these legacy contracts guarantee that we lose money, and as such, continuing them in their current forms is not in Cumulus's best interests." This is talking about one contract they're trying to let go that would save them $50 million, but currently Cumulus is only looking at 20 of their nearly 15,000 contracts with broadcasting stations to let go. And again, that would come with deciding which ones are unprofitable or not, and looking at those benchmarks that the company establishes. So I'm going to hand it off to Laith next to see where we can innovate.
Sure.
No problem.
Our last recommendation is going to improve our overall digital presence. And by this, we mean three things: a centralized app, a better website, and embracing the smart speaker technology. With a centralized app, it would allow for kind of a larger scale of advertising to other people and allow advertisers to utilize this app to really reach a lot of the listeners and consumers. It would also provide kind of a platform for consumers to listen to Cumulus Radio whenever they want, and perhaps even some of the Westwood One brands like certain NFL games on the radio or like the Olympics. With improving the website, we actually found through research that Cumulus averaged in January 2018 roughly 124,000 visits in comparison to Entercom, who had about 1.4 million visits, and iHeartMedia, who had 6.6 million visits. And the reason for this we found is that our website is it's not very interactive. Consumers can't really access or listen to any music on the website. It's kind of broad. While you can research any radio station you want to find, you can't listen to it whenever you want. With Entercom and iHeart, they both have platforms where consumers can engage with the website and listen to it whenever they want. And it's also overall a more sleeker design in comparison to our website. And lastly, we need to utilize the smart speaker technology. While we've already taken steps to address this with the Amazon Alexa deal where we're playing over 300 of our local stations on there, I feel that we need to kind of dive into other brands as well, because by 2020, 75% of American households are expected to own smart speakers. And this, as you can see on this graph, this number is growing exponentially. In conclusion, we feel that our recommendations best address our weaknesses, and we hope that with our recommendations, we can turn these weaknesses into opportunities. Any questions?
So you mentioned how the radio industry is trailing the market GDP. Do you know what the market GDP was?
We don't have that information right now, but I can get it for you. Thank you after this.
So I have a question about your first recommendation. So you wanted to, you said back out of certain. Yeah, so you wanted to back out of certain deals or consolidate. How would you make up for losing the audiences of those stations that you're?
Right. So, like I said before, kind of viewing that was it's moving back into our area of expertise. So, like I said before, we were a mid-sized market-focused company, and kind of backing out of those areas is almost a way to bring home what we were good at before. And really bringing that home. So yes, we would lose probably depending on the market. So for this example, we used the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago White Sox, but it is a deal, and Entercom actually just picked it up because they're focused on large media markets. But with that, it's a deal where we're only projected to lose money, and it's worth $50 million. So it just comes down to, in the future, yes, you're losing that audience, but it's not. We're already in the hole as it is, so it's just not going to benefit us going forward. Yeah.
So I also have a question about your recommendations, kind of just generally. What recommendations do you kind of believe can be done almost immediately, and what are more long term?
I think, well, generally speaking. With the whole thing with Chapter 11 bankruptcy, that's going to have to be passed, and then immediately, the goal will be to raise funds so that we can start moving into the platforms that Leigh talked about.
Yeah, we need to consolidate, and like we said, back out of unprofitable deals in order to really have cash to operate and spend on improving our website and app.
You kind of touched on the smart speakers and how the growth of that is going to continue. You said they have a consolidation with, I believe it was Alexa, the Google speaker, if I'm correct. How are they trying to tap into the other ones to compete, like the other types of speakers and things like that in the future?
That was actually part of our recommendation because right now they're just solely on Amazon Alexa, and while they are taking steps to address it because they have 300 local stations and they have some of their Westwood One brands on there, they haven't really dived into Google or Apple yet, and we feel that's one of our recommendations that they need to do because, again, by 2020, 75% of American households are going to have smart speakers, so it's going to be a common household item by 2020.
Thank
you. Yep.
For the first recommendation, you mentioned backing out of the unprofitable deals. You said something about finding benchmarks to compare them? Do you know like any specifics, not like number wise, but just kind of what you'd be looking for?
Like I said, we coming from an outside perspective, financial records for individual radio stations aren't public, so we can't really measure between the radio stations what that benchmark would be. You'd have to compare that net profit margin with the actual profit margins of those stations to get that benchmark. And like I said, it's going to vary whether you're looking at mid-sized markets, small markets, or large markets, just on how much they contribute and how much they're raising, because some are capable of raising far more than others.
Can you tie back? I think I missed a little bit with the industry part of what you when you started out, like what got you focused on, these two areas, and how I just would like to hear you restate how you tied it back to the industry for me.
These, like the two companies?
The two recommendations in terms of what's going on in the industry.
Oh, gotcha. Well, actually, we found that, at least with improving our digital platform, the digital radio industry is growing about 9.8% in comparison to non-digital, which is only growing 2.7%. While it's not like substantially large, and it's not like completely taking away all the revenue of the AM/FM radio, it's still growing, and it's still something we feel that we need to address, like Entercom and iHeart already have.
And additionally, this is based off of the growing consumer demographic known as millennials. They'll make up 40% of the entire consumer market by 2020. So meeting their needs within the consumer market is very important. They want content that can interact with them on the social platforms that now is offered. They want their content quick, and they want to be able to interact with the brand. And really, the websites that we offer right now don't allow consumers to do that as much. And going forward, millennials are going to be looking for that big time. So just pushing towards that digital shift is also tailoring it to those millennials, which are going to be very important in the future.
So just from a clarity perspective, it seems like you continue to want to focus us locally, yet some of this investment you're talking about feels much more national focused. So, what are we trying to be? And, how much, so I answer that question, and then I think I have a follow-up question is, what's this investment going to entail for the technology?
Okay, so if you like, for example, if you're looking at the Apple App Store, you see that Cumulus has these just various local radio station apps, and we feel that it's inconvenient to the consumer just to download all these separate apps and listen to their favorite local stations versus one centralized app where they can listen to any radio station anytime they want, while also listening, like what I mentioned earlier, the Westwood One brands, like the NFL, the Olympics, the Grammys, some of the more national focused stuff. And then to answer your second question, developing an app and improving a website will definitely require some capital. We aren't necessarily sure how much, but upon consolidating all of our unprofitable deals and backing out of those unprofitable media markets, we feel that we'll have enough cash to operate and develop these apps and our website.
And essentially, going off of what you said about kind of making it feel national and like it's a big investment. But in terms of making the apps, it allows people to bring their local stations and their stations that they listen to in their small like hometown wherever they want. That's what the app will offer.
So you did you have a question?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned that Cumulus had been focused on mid-size, second-tier markets. They made the acquisitions that pushed them into major markets. Are you suggesting you didn't? I don't think I heard you quite go there. Are you suggesting that they should get out of the big markets, sell those off, and go back to their mid-market roots, or something else? Because it may be a little counterintuitive, right? That the biggest markets generate the most revenue, you might think that they would be more profitable than the smaller ones.
Exactly, and that goes back to establishing that benchmark. So we'd have to evaluate kind of the profitability of all of them, and like you said, I believe it would be counterintuitive to just back out altogether. So you would have to establish the benchmarks of all the markets, depending on size, and then yes, we're not suggesting get rid of all the large markets and just become what we used to be, because we're too far gone at that point. We are already in the position to make an impact, so why not just stay focused where we are?
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
What was your big idea that you got from the industry analysis?
I would say that with the industry analysis, it was like kind of important for us to like look at the companies like within the industry and how they were interacting. And I think the biggest thing that we noticed as a team was just not necessarily this huge shift to digital and that everything needed to become digital, but that our competitors were starting to be in a space that we were not in. And so as a company, Cumulus needs to be able to compete in the markets that their competitors are competing in, because ultimately they're trying to get as many listeners as possible, because that's going to generate their ad revenue. And so for us, I think that we saw iHeartMedia dabbling in this different space, and for us, we were looking at Cumulus like, so what's holding Cumulus back from not being in those areas? And so for us, we really wanted to give the recommendation of course, they are not in the best financial situation right now, so it's easy for us to sit back and say, oh, well, like, go digital, do this, you'll make money that way, and that's not necessarily true. So for us, we really wanted to look at what we were doing and how we can be more focused, because the biggest thing that stood out to us with Entercom was the fact that they're a focused market and they know what their consumers want because they're focused on their specific sector. And if Cumulus can get back to this main idea of being that like competitive in their mid-sized market, then we can talk about moving into being competitive in the areas that iHeartMedia and Entercom are competitive in. You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, give us a couple minutes to